Hey people, I was going to read more of this Gibby's crime, and I got down here where they were beating on the door, and the master of the house, and I seen the master of the house as, Bolevit, believe it, and it's also Levite, the Levite, here's the E over here, Levite, is the master of the house. And I remember, there's no names anywhere in here, except at the top it says, the Levite and his concubine. Except it doesn't say Levite in here. It just says, the LVI, which has the diamond that reads a couple different ways. There was a certain Levite staying in the remote mountains of Ephraim. And I seen it, this was going to describe, the ish, the kind of, and what kind of levager he was in the remote. If you read the lower markings, it's by your rickety, and then back the other way, crib, K-R-I-B, by your rickety cribity, I-T-I, your little bitty rickety crib in the mountains. And I run into this word here, Ephraim. It's actually Meyer, the papyri. And that's where the word papyrus comes from. That was the first paper. And so I went to look up the first time, Ephraim come up, to see why he got his name. And it's said to be one of the two sons of Joseph before the famine. And this is right after the story of, the 7 good years and the 7 bad years. And he named the first one the increments, the small steps, to give incensing, the small steps to give incensing. And all him at look, a little homely. All him at look a little homely, a little ugly. What the clit of it of ye. The clit of it of ye. So it's saying, he's a little homely pussy in the clit of it of ye. So this is where your word mincemeat come from. And that's the way they make you forget, has made me forget. It's the same way that McDonald's, they started with 100% pure beef, and they mince it all up in little bitty pieces. Then they slowly start switching it out with bean products and aborted fetuses and stuff like that. The mince and anchor in the step of little bitties to give incensing, so they don't sense it. Sense and incense. It made me forget. The same thing as the new normal. They separate us all, they mince us all up into our one little spot, and then they try to slowly change things. Same way they changed the language in the small increments. And the name of the second called is what's the sign for? What's the sign for? A primicky in reap appearing. So a primicky, is primitive, of of before, and from fold is to make, a primicky. And the pre-made, a primicky, before its time, in reap appearing. His nuts dropped early. It's caused me to be fruitful. So in the Mississippi Delta, they give away a prize for whoever has, the first crop, the first cotton, a primic of the first, in reap, ripe, in the first ripe, and the first ready to reap, appearing. All him barked on all embarks sun, embarked sunny, and everything he embarks, every mission he embarks on, he leaves sunny, shining, happily. That's your affliction. Once they see that you embark happily, They're going to ask you to do everything. And so the sign for, this is of rim. And it's the same, the Egypt is MXRIM. And I believe that's what that means, is the rim, down at the edge of the water at the rim. And that's where you get your first crops, down in the valleys. And this is going to explain mixed rim, from its rim a little better. Egypt, the word Egypt in here. So up here at 37, after the good advice, Joseph was given charge of Egypt. So took Pharaoh his signet ring, the ring he used to sign all the government papers. He took it off and put it in the hand of Joseph. And he lavished what to Ngadi of fine linen. And so this is what caught me, this is in goddesses, 3 S's, in goddesses, and lavish what to in goddesses wisdom, WISM. And goddesses wisdom rubbed these have. And so this gold is coming from the word bees. Bees have honey. These have, and sometimes it's read backwards or forwards, the bees these have. So the bees have the honey. They want them rubbed in the honey. And all wear what's waro. And so this word waro, around his neck, it makes me think it's, all the royal. They wore a necklace because they were aware. Varo, waro. And it says trade, good, merchandise, commodity. But it's also, to watch out. And in the Spanish, it's money. Ware or commodities, merchandise. But in Old English, this waro, to care, to watch, observation, to guard, protection, defense. And I believe it's coming from this waro, which is a sea hibiscus. And it's used for several things, but it's most useful as litmus paper. Flour change color due to the anthocyanin in it. So when it says to know, it's the knowledge of the augurs. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for these plants that have changed color and tell you the pH level of the soil and know what's good to farm there. And that's where the knowing comes from. So this, and put a chain gold around his neck, in goddesses whose summer bed, some of them have chains on their bed, whose summer bed these have. If you're a goddess, you might have linen on your bed. Whose summer bed these have all the wear what's wore. Your bed dressing. Some of them have fine linen sheets. And some of them pull them off and wear them as clothes. So it might be talking about a ghost here. And this next line down tells off some about Egypt. And he had a ride, him in chariot, the second which he had. And they cried out before him, bow the knee, a break, bend your knee. So he set him over all the land of Egypt. It's want when automatically the self, all culture, backwards, the cultures, all culture wrecks, all culture drugs from the XR. It's playing with this XR here. The Chiro, that's a sign of the Pope. And the Rex is the king, and the drugs, it's the czar, sign of the Pope, the king, the czar, and all culture, the drugs, MITS, MX from its rim. And they're getting the first crop. That's what Egypt means, where they culture the drugs from its rim. So it gives a better idea what ugliness means. In the culture, the drugs from its rim of row. Of row is R, the first C. It's right out there in front, the first to see of row for its ugliness. And you see this word gaunt come up here a couple times and spelled totally different ways. This is usually, they say this is flesh of the body. And here it's a total different word they had to jam in there. And the ugly, you see it's only got the R-O here in common. So I want to read this line here the 3 different ways and show you how these meanings change, and how this changes from the consideration to the fat, and how this changes from the fruit to the cows, the offer what. So this other word here for the gaunt, the gaunt does say is thin or lean, narrow, is a gauntlet. And so the gaunt ugly is the ugly gaunt that's her foot wear out. Her foot wear out is the ugly gauntlet. And it's talking about Italy. It's the big foot wear out, and it causes the gauntlet. You have to travel through the gauntlet, this little narrow spot. If you're in Egypt and you're growing the RX over here, you have to pass by the XR before you can get anything out through the gates. And she got her old ugly foot out. Another word for a gauntlet is a spooey, but they'll say it doesn't have pronouncing. They say it means a single point urban interchange, where everything's got to go through the gauntlet. In Amsterdam, it was the original body of water that formed in the southern limit of the city. When the single canal was dug, everything has to go through there, a single canal. They say it's related to the word the spew, the spewing, or spewway. And that comes up lower down there. And so I believe that's where they're getting this gaunt from. And it's down here, and put it on the hand of Joseph, and he clothed him. It's all ditty of spew, of lives, Lives, which is another word for a gauntlet, and he put it on his hand, and put it on his hand, and put it on the hand of Joseph, the spew who lives. And so it's saying that he lives over there at the spewway, at the spew of lives. So I'm going to read it first. I'm just going to read the letters. And this line, it doesn't have any bold directional markings. And so we could read it here in this old Torah. And to clean the fruit, her foot wear out. At sieve all, the OE becomes the odal, put an L between it. The sieve all, the fruit, her ration what every at. Her ration what every at. And that's here, it's not and ate up, it's and ate up everything, and to and clean, to a call is to eat, and NE is the seed life. If you eat all the grass and the seed life too, it's cleaned out. It's not going to grow back. And to clean the fruit, her foot wear out. The gaunt ugly. At sieve, consume in it to receive. At sieve all the fruit, her ration what every EVRY every at. Her ration every at. That's like your government, they taxing the tax on the tax. They tax it on the way in and on the way out. And that's why it'll say the Chiro is your enemy here in the Hebrew Bible. But because that was the czar and that was your enemy, that's what they're talking about. What to clean of fruit, her foot wear out at sieve. All the fruit, the ration, what every at. The brie is where your word briar come from. And it means something you be having to think about. You have to take into consideration the briar. It's not going to stop you. It's going to slow you down. The briar is a inconvenience, a bother, trouble. Coming from the bry, the briar at. And so this sieve all, it doesn't necessarily mean sieve all, but the OE is the air. It's where your word fish roe comes from. Fish eggs, heir of the kings, or the fishes, officials, the old. And so the OE is the odal. And you just pronounce it OL and then the E. But when you're reading it, that's what it says is deceive all, not all, but just the royals, the fruit, the ration, what the brie at, what the spur in my saddle. When you read it with the lower markings, it's Vatical, Votacol. The Vatical lines, with the Vatican and the Vata, the vat, what a call, what to call, to take their cut. The con is the priest, what to con are the priests, the Vatican, and what to call is the action of what they're doing, they're culling. And the Vatical lines, I-N, and A-E becomes the E-S. The Vatical lines, the offer what? And that's where they're getting the cows, the O-P-A-R, the offer what? The Vatical lines, the offer what? And ear, E-A-R, the hear of, O-F, the ear of water, W-A, and then back here and grab this again up to the Q. And the Q's reading with this Q, W-I-E-A-R-A. And it's making fun of words. It's the query, the queera, to ask, to seek, the query. But just the Q-U-I, that's where your word quiet come from. It means the water to quell, to quiet. And very, this is one of the ways they're getting ugly out of it. This is the scallop roofs of Vero. Is those scallop roofs you'll see there all across the south side of the Med. And here of water, the query of what? The line underneath here says read this as an O-V, of what? It's letting you know not to read this as the out. And the query of what, and the A-E becomes the E-S. The query of what the stat line says S-T-A-T. The status is the S and then the H-Z underneath the H-S. And what are query of what the status is? Bool, B-O, two O's, B-O-O, and then E, so B-O-O-L-E. Well-being, coming from the Vool in German. Bool, kindness. Here of water, query of what? A status is Vool, a status of health. And then underneath is the O of para, P-A-R-A, parallel, along with, going along with. The para what? Water query of what? A status is Bool, the well-being. Of para what? And then come back and grab this R-U-T. Of para what route? What route you're taking? Along the route. The era, the time as new, and then T-E-R as neuters. The time is cuts off. Time is what neuters. And that final N up there is reading with this E-O. The neo mean new. The new virae, ought. A V-I-R-A-I, viro, virae. And it means to turn, a new turn. Turn the winch, pull up the anchor. And this is in all your Mediterranean languages, Spanish, Italian, French, same thing, vire. It does say in the French alteration of gyro, to turn, to deviate, to veer off. You have to change course. A neo-vire, a new direction of ought. The Vatical lines, the offer what? Here of water, query of what? Is status Vool, the health, para, what route, along with what route? The era as neuters. And there's a bunch in this word, you can see the erasing what era, erasing the times in, and the ration, the water as in. And so when it says first, it's talking about the god of destruction, which usually the base word shit, means destruction. And what are query of what is statuses, bull, of health, of well-being, a para of along with route, erasing, and terras, neo, and new, virae, the turn out. So what this is mainly saying is, in the time of Genesis 41, the Hebrew is written, the Vatican had been running things long enough that they had time to write about them and make these jokes about them that read several different ways in their letters. And it's the Vatical, the vat of a call to eat, what to call. They had the calling, and the priest be called the con. What to the call and what to the clean. The Vatical line, it was their line. Their line was right here. Everybody was farming in Egypt, was all the best farmland. The Vatican was taking their cut across here. And so in order to read this, you got to read it 100 times, because it says many more things in here. Vatical lines, the offer, what? The ear, ear of, to turf, T-E-R-F. When you're coming back, you don't read all the vowel points. And the ear of to turf, the ear to the ground. It means to see into the future. I don't remember the old movie, but the Indians lay on the ground, and he says, a wagon, 8 horses, a wagon, and 3 people, and a dog. And the settler says, you could tell all that's coming just by listening to the ground? He said, no, they just run over me. But, that's to hear what's coming. You listen to the ground. And that's why elephants and crocodiles, alligators are a real good sign. You see the alligators swimming north, it's fixing to pour down rain. The elephants know. They got big pads. They feel the ground. They know it's coming. So when you read the upper marks, he done wrote a story here with just these letters, and then he come back to add to his story by adding vowel points to add more to the story. And then this is the 3rd time around. He's trying to make it say something again. And so he's going to really be creating words like a poet in here. But this is now, W-T-T-O. What to. And what to clean, and then come grab this again with these upper marks. Clean, clean, clean. Anytime they double something up, it means very. The first one they say is very. Very clean. Mad, mad, very mad. Moody, moot, very moot, very dead. And what to cleany clean. And this is where your word clinical comes from. C-L-N-E-C-L-N. A clinical in. And then the line says 2 E's, which is a he. And what to a clinical in he ho, H-O. And then F-A-R-Y, fairy. Fairy is what's going to go across the gauntlet. They try to find the narrowest spot, and that's where they ferry traffic across. But what to a clinical in he ho, his job, he ho, where that comes from. And heave is the pull and the hoe and rest, he ho. And what to clinical in he ho, ferry of, the dot makes this a O-V now, of turf. He ferry of turf fought, the E-R-F-F-O-U-T. And so the clinician, the doctor was fighting for. And what to a clinical in he ho, ferry of turf fought. He fought for his ground. But this also says, what to the clinical knee, N-E-E-E, ferry of. Neferi, that's the Egyptian word they'll say is beauty. The Neferi, the Nephero. It is changed to meaning, nefarious, evil. Nefarious, wicked, evil. And so it's also, what to the clinical in he ho, his job of the ferry of turf. And so a fairy's turf is the butt, and they constantly talking about boofing up in here. And turf fought Vero out, Vero, and then the dot gives that a O-U-T. There's two O's there. Vero meaning tax in the Finnish, but in the Latin it's true, truth. And most of the Mediterranean languages, they'll say it means true. And so it's possibly this word's been changed to change the meaning of the Latin Bible. But it either means the truth or taxes. The turf fought truth out, the tax out. And so what two of clinical Nefario Tero, Tearo, the musketeer and the privateers, those type of people. And the clinical Nefario Tero fought the Vero out, fought the truth out. And as, O-S, that's the way pirates will say what was, as, what was, the bowl, the gauntlet, bowl. It's just one O now, B-O-L-E. So the bowl, the base of a tree, the trunk of a tree. And so amongst the fairies, the gauntlet, the ugly gauntlet would be a butthole. And it's also, her footwear out is ugly. The roots coming up on the tree, and it's ugly because, it means erosion, but also because they were digging the roots out of these trees to make drugs out of. But this is the bowl and the gaunt, the same as a river where it's all tied together and coming out the spillway and spreads out. The same is the gaunt that you put on your hand, goes from your narrow wrist to where all your fingers spread out, which is also a gaunt. The truth out, Vero out. At his vole, the para of terra, along with the terra as on out of your yacht. So it sounds it's written by the sailors when it says we, and the para along with the terras in out haver. And he's talking about, the terror, the para-terra, what goes along with the terras in out ever yacht, never boating again. When they pull you over and they say, out of your yacht. When you get caught with drugs, they take your ship and your drugs. You're out of your yacht. And so that's all I did is read this line. And I would have to read this. This is written in a paragraph style here. It's not like the Proverbs one-liners where you read them all three ways. This, when you read the whole story, or until a marking, which is here, and you read the whole paragraph, and then you go back and you read the lower markings, and then you go back and read the upper markings. And so it takes all of this just to read one line. So you can imagine if you knew how to read the Bible, it's the only book you would ever need all your life. You could read it forever. But I'm going to backtrack back to where I was. The reason I came to see the meaning of this word, because in this first line of where I was reading here, it has the three names. It has Israel and Levi. It's not Levite, this is Levi. And a prim and wife and Isis, concubine, and from the victuals come. The victuals come. They say the house of bread is what Bethlehem means. No, the house is the victuals come, and Judah. And so I run into all these other words much in the Bible, but this one didn't come up that often, so I had to check it out. But I'm going to look at this in this next movie. But I'm going to cut this off here. Good day.